Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone. It's the hardest game right now. You can't escape it. You load up Twitch, you load up YouTube, you load up anything to do with gaming. More often than not, it's about Call of Duty Warzone. So let's have a look over what kind of spec is going to be ideal for this massively popular game. And we're going to get into that after a message from our sponsor. So, of course, we're sponsored by me because I run jcpccustoms.com where we sell gaming PCs. You've got pre-built gaming PCs in the ready-to-go PC section, and they'll be ready to go the next day. Or you can get in touch for a completely custom spec to your exact needs. So completely up to you which one you want to go down. We just focus on really high build quality. We test them all rigorously, and we provide a really good setup guide with them. So even if it's your first time with a gaming PC, it should be fairly simple to get up and running. So yeah, jcpccustoms.com. It's only for the UK though, so sorry guys if you're international, but it's just not going to work. I'm sorry. It's not me, it's you. Actually, it's me, don't worry. Anyway, end of the sponsor spot. Let's get into the meat of the video. So we've got 4 segments, okay? So we're going for different kind of budgets and what you can sort of expect to get with them, right? All of them are going to give you a decent experience. Of course, the more you spend, the better frames you're going to get. And it's going to sort of depend on, you know, your play style and that kind of thing. But let's go. We're going for a general overview. We've got budget, we've got lower mid-range, we've got upper mid-range, and we've got high-end. All right. So depending on what sort of customers you like. So, and there's sort of along the timeline, if you like, on YouTube, you'll be able to skip to the section that applies more to you. So let's start with budget. And when I'm talking about budget, because Warzone, man, it's a hard game to run. You can't put this on potato software and potato hardware and expect it to work. It's not like Fortnite where it will run on pretty much anything. Warzone is quite intense. So for budget, I'm calling this under £850 sterling. All right, so a PC that you could expect to get for this price. So the processor is one of the key parts. So is the memory, or the RAM as people call it. You also want to run it off an SSD, so we're having SSDs for all of them. And in terms of the video card, we also want to be talking about that as well, don't we? So those are the 4 key components that we're going to be talking about. Of course, all the components of a computer matter. These are just the ones that might make the biggest difference to the gaming performance in Call of Duty Warzone. So Warzone hits the CPU and the video card pretty tough. It's pretty tough on both. So for the CPU, even on the budget range, we're going for 6-core processors. So this is the i5-10400F or the Ryzen 5 3600. Completely your choice. They are identical performance, so it's whichever you prefer. I have a penchant for the Ryzen 5 3600 just because you might get a bit more of an upgrade path with that one to the 5000 series. Whereas if you go with a 10400F, there's less of an upgrade opportunity there. So, but both are great, so get whichever. And for the memory, we want 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 speed, and you want that in dual channel, so that basically means 2 lots of 8. And that's going to be enough, because I know that Warzone can use, 10 to 12 gigabytes of RAM sometimes in some situations. So having a decent amount of RAM is going to help it run nice and smoothly. We want to run all of our Call of Duty Warzone systems. You want them on SSDs. You want to run the game off an SSD as well, because it will make the game load up quicker, and it will make the loading screens shorter. And I think it might also help with, at the start on PC, you have to install the shaders as the game boots up, and I think it might help with that as well. So we're definitely running all of them off SSDs, and I suggest having in your system at least a 500 gigabyte SSD, but ideally a terabyte or more. And for the video card, on the budget range, it's the GTX 1660 Super, which is just a 1080p resolution classic video card. Really good for all those kind of esports titles. But what sort of performance are we going to get with the budget system here? So if we're playing on 1080p on sort of low to medium settings, what we call the competitive settings, you could expect to get around 100 to 110 frames per second, which will look nice and smooth compared to 60 frames per second if you've perhaps been using console before. So it makes a nice entry level, and a great way to pair this would be with a 1080p 144Hz monitor. That would be ideal. Now let's move on to the lower mid-range. So this will be £1,400 or less. So we've bumped up some of the spec here. So we have, instead of the 10400F, we've chosen the 11400F, just because it's really good performance compared to how much you're paying for it. The other, the contemporary to this from AMD's side would be the Ryzen 5 5600X. The only issue with that is it's about £80 more expensive, so I would be recommending the 11400F for the lower mid-range. We've got the same 16GB recommendation, same SSD recommendation for all of them, and the video card I've chosen for this one would be the RTX 3060 Ti. And that would give you really nice performance. So with this combination, I'd be expecting you'll be able to, hit that 144 frames per second pretty much constantly when you're playing Warzone at 1080p. So that shouldn't be a problem at all. You might even get closer to maybe 180, 190. It depends on the situation. But this would be a very solid 144Hz Warzone machine. But if you were to use this in Fortnite, for example, you'd be pulling over 300 frames per second probably. It just shows, Fortnite's much better optimized than Warzone. If you prefer an AMD graphics card, the RX 6700 XT would do a really good job, and I think that would be a great choice as well. It'd probably be a little bit faster than the 3060 Ti actually. So if you have affiliation or whatever towards either side, then there's two good options there for you. Moving on to the upper mid-range. So this is around sort of the £1,800 mark. This would be slightly higher end than the lower mid-range one. You'll be squeezing out a bit more frames per second with this one. So we'd have, for the processor, we'd have the Ryzen 5 5600X. And this is just really good because it's got that super fast single core speed, which is really good for those CPU heavy games like Warzone. And then obviously we're just going to stick with the same RAM and SSD here. And the graphics card on this one, I've chosen the RTX 3070 Ti. You could also use the 3070 as well, that would be fine as well. But with the Ti you get a little bit of that extra boost, and it's going to give you that bit of extra performance. So at 1080p with the 3070 Ti, I think you'd be knocking on the door of 200 frames per second at 1080p competitive settings. And because it's such a CPU hog, you could put this up to 1440p resolution on the low to medium settings and probably get a very similar frame rate, probably something around 140, maybe up to 160 on 1440p on this. So if you're somebody that wants that sharper 1440p resolution monitor but still wants some good frame rates, I think this would be a really good choice. These are all, of course, estimates of frames per second, just based on the hundreds of computers that I've put together, what kind of performance you tend to get from them. Now, for those that really want to go all out and just go no compromises, I want the best machine, I want to play Warzone at just the peak of what is able to happen on gaming PCs. This is going to be the high-end bracket, so this is £2,200 plus, so it could be anywhere all the way up to £5,000 if you really wanted to. But something more around the 2200 mark would be better in terms of value for money. So for the processor, you want the Ryzen 7 5800X, which is 8 core 16 threads, or you want the Ryzen 9 5900X, which is 12 cores and 24 threads. They'll be very, very similar speed in-game. So if you're pure gaming, go for the 5800X. If you're somebody that likes to do a bit of streaming on the side, or have lots of programs open at the same time as you're gaming, then a 5900X would be a better choice. But both are going to give you awesome Warzone performance. Because we're in the high end now, let's bump that up to 32GB of RAM. That's going to give you enough headroom for a bit of streaming or having some other programs open, as well as running Warzone at nice, decent settings as well. For the SSD, at least 500GB again, just like the others. Now, for the video card, you can go for a 3080, you can go for a 3080 Ti, or you can go for a 3090, or on the AMD side you go for a 6800 XT or a 6900 XT, and they'd all give you amazing performance. These are super high-end, really nice graphics cards, and these are really some of the only ones that are going to get you to hit that 240 frames per second in Warzone, which so many people are striving for. So let's say you went with the 3080 and the 5800X as sort of the cheaper options among the high-end options. At 1080p on the low to medium settings, I reckon you'd be getting about 220 frames per second average, which is very good for Warzone. Again, if you're to compare this to Fortnite, you could probably be getting about 500 FPS in Fortnite. So it just shows you again the optimization of the game could do with a bit of work. If we start pushing this up to the 3080 Ti and the 3090, which are roughly the same in terms of performance, then you might just squeeze out another 10 to 15 frames per second. But really at this point it's all to do with processing power, and these are the fastest processors we've got, so there's not really much more you can do to make this faster, unless you want to delve into overclocking, which is not a topic for the video today. But yeah, that's going to really just completely demolish anything you throw at it. So if you play this at 1080p, yeah, easy 220 frames per second, no problem. 1440p, it's probably going to be pretty much the same, again, because we're probably limited by the processor. So you'd probably get about 200 FPS when you're playing at 1440p. You could play this at 4K if you wanted. If you want to play on 4K low to medium settings, you might get sort of around 120, 130 FPS, so if you're into your 4K gaming, then you could do that. And that same goes for ultra-wide as well. If you've got one of these ultra-wide monitors, then it will do nicely in that as well. Sort of the same as 4K performance. So yeah, hopefully those are pretty useful for you. Some good specs that we can put together for Warzone. Please leave a like on your way out and subscribe.